Welcome back to The Move, where we're vibing through the book 10 minutes at a time. I'm your host, Justin Koo, and in today's episode, we're talking about that one time in the Bible that actually really gets Benjamin Williams, the pastor, all pissed off and upset because he doesn't know what to do with the text. If you're wondering what we're looking at, Genesis chapter 27, verses 1 through 46, Ben, we were talking about, and maybe I mischaracterized it a little too harshly, but you and I were talking about how this is one of those stories. We're talking about the story where basically Jacob steals the blessing from Esau. You might remember his father is blind and is about to die, so he wants to pass on his blessing to Esau. And then Jacob and his mom have this scheme that involves cooking up a goat, putting fur on his neck and his arms, and then pretending to be his brother to steal the blessing. You and I were talking about how this is a story that we've heard a lot growing up, and how a lot of times people will tell the story and be like, and here's the great part about this story, or like have some kind of, I don't know, pithy lesson or something. But you have always felt that that has been a disservice to a fair reading of this passage. And I'm curious why. Like, what is, when you read this chapter, what kind of emotions does it elicit for you?
I think the big one is just like frustration, and frustration two ways. One, because I think there's a lot of things in this section that just confuse me, just like really confuse me. And then secondly, frustration because I don't know, maybe it's because the way I grew up and was taught about like you shouldn't like even for the right reasons, like you shouldn't just like do very bad things. And like Jacob and his mom are literally scheming a blind old man, and like I mean, think about this. Like, the father's sitting there and he's like, I want to bless my son.
Yeah.
And then the mom and the other son literally trick this blind old man into being like, nope, you're not going to get that with your son. You're going to have to do it with this other one. And
it's not just
sad.
Stealing candy from a baby, but it's robbing a blessing from an old blind man.
Yeah. And they almost rob them of like a relational moment even too, because when you see they come together, and like Esau's like, where's my blessing, Dad? And the dad is just so distraught. Like he's like,
man, could you imagine
so
the embarrassment?
sorry.
Yeah, just being the father, like, oh, what do you mean? Like, I thought I gave it to you. Okay, so there, it's not even seemingly. There's absolutely some kind of relational damage that takes place. We see at the end of this passage that the family is literally divided. They're split up. The family is in many senses never the same again, because you don't get to see your dad pass away. You just like there's thankfully later in the story, spoiler alert, the brothers do reconcile. There is this moment of kind of closure, but the consequences of this are dire. Yeah. And so, I get the frustration. I'm wondering, and maybe this is too much insight. You can tell me that you don't want to answer this question if there's something underlying here. I don't know what I'm going to find. But do you have some kind of like family challenges where this kind of hit home for you or something like that? I don't know. Do you have any siblings, or did you have like a close cousin that you would fight with or something along those lines?
No, I mean, I have siblings, but definitely, I don't think that there's really anything that's like connecting with like this story specifically, where like my dad was blind and then he got tricked. No, but no, I think it's just tough reading sometimes, and tough like reconciling with the idea of like, why is this story praised? And I think at some level, to me, even just thinking about it right now, there is some level of like the David story. You know how we praise David, but David did some really messed up stuff, and there's almost a gift in that, that we're able to see these characters and realize that even if there was these things that they did wrong, like God still sought to have his will be done through their life, and they weren't able to thwart it through their own humanness. And I think go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
No, I think like it's just comforting to me, even though it's also frustrating, and I think also probably some of the frustration is a reflection, maybe not of my relationship with my family, but just even like my own relationship with myself throughout my past. Like sometimes like I can really look back and get really frustrated. Like, man, what was I doing? Like I literally just tricked someone out of A, B, or C, like proverbially, right? Like maybe I didn't trick someone out of their blessing. And I think like when I see other people do it, it can almost be more infuriating when I see someone do the same thing that I do.
Ooh. Okay, that cuts deep, because you're seeing yourself in this moment. You want to be the honorable, good, moral, stand-up citizen that that you're called to be. And yet, in the same way that our maybe what's kind of like POV character, our point of view character for this story seems to be falling short on all of that. Yeah, I think that there's something to that we get frustrated at others in that which we see in ourselves.
Yeah.
Right? That there's this certain truth to this idea that oftentimes I don't know what you preach, but what I've heard, what people preach tends to be first and foremost directed to themselves. So the
Mm.
thing that we get frustrated at in others, often we see in ourselves, and that's why we're so frustrated, is because we feel like we wish we could change ourselves, and maybe in a way to get a sense of control over our own circumstance, we want to go and control other people's circumstance. So I can understand how you would relate to this story and how that would be frustrating.
Yeah. I think so. And I even just like thinking about it even more right now. There was a prophecy from the beginning
Hmm.
that Jacob was going to be the one that's going to receive the blessings and be the leader, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that this is like a similar thread that we keep seeing is although there had been this prophecy of what was going to happen, because, right, like prophecy is, in my mind, more than anything, it's descriptive of the future rather than prescriptive. Not like it's not like you have to do these things, but actually prophecy is letting us know what will happen because it has this form of foreknowledge of knowing the future. And so if that's true and God says, hey, Jacob, you're going to have these blessings, you're going to be the leader of this family, you're going to be the one that actually carries the covenant, the Abrahamic covenant that's coming down, like you're going to be the one that carries this for your family. Like all he actually had to do was wait and trust that what God said was true.
Yes.
But instead
Yes.
he literally decides to take deception and he forces it. And can you imagine like what would the story have been like if he decided just to wait? Like he and his mother just didn't get impatient and they just waited on the Lord. Like maybe they wouldn't have had to like destroy their family relationship. And spoiler alert, maybe like Jacob would have been able to see his mother again. Like he's
Mhm.
literally robbed of his mother, of his like relationship with his brother for a long time, and his father has to deal with all this guilt, has to deal with Laban, has to deal with all of these terrible things. Even though, yes, like God pulls through and he gets what was always going to be his in the end. Like he brought so much pain and suffering to himself and his family and everyone around him by trying to take for himself what was
Yeah.
already going to be his.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you could look at him reaching out in this way as in one very kind of twisted way, right? Like an act of faith in that, oh, I believe that the promise is so mine that I'm going to go out there and just grab it for myself. But I think on a maybe in a different look or different lens with which we could see this story, that this is actually an expression of unbelief. That there's no
Yeah.
way that this could possibly happen. God, I don't know that you're going to work it out. And so I'm going to do everything that I can do to secure this because I think it's what I'm owed, and I'm not confident that it's going to just happen when I wait and when I trust. And when I look at the story from that perspective, I do see myself more and more in the story, right? Like there's this belief that God says like, "Hey, listen, reconciliation is accomplished, that you're good, like, you can have peace, you can have all these things." Like there's this promise of the gospel of this new kind of life. There's this promise of you're standing before God. And I know that what I have done over however many years of following Jesus is I have in many moments attempted to secure that for myself. I've tried to earn what is already mine. And maybe on one reading, that's an expression of faith. You're trying to chase after that which is promised to you. But in another sense, it's an expression of doubt that you
Yeah.
don't believe that you already have what he said you have.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I mean, what does this look like in our own Christian walk? Like where so often, like you're saying, God has promised and given us things, and yet we take them as a hopeful future that we can create rather
Yeah.
than a actual like present reality that he has already created. Because I think so
Yeah.
often I read scripture and I read things like the fruit of the spirit. I read things like Ephesians 1 with the blessings that I have from heaven through Jesus Christ. And I read them as hopeful realities that maybe I can bend and I can work
Mm.
up to.
Yeah. If I
And
only do fill in the
yeah,
blank enough or well enough, then I can
yeah.
have those things.
And I can remember being really legalistic, especially when I was younger. Especially when
Mhm.
I was like early in Christianity, when I was about 18 and I was really convinced like God was real. I got really legalistic because I saw the Bible this way. I saw the Bible as a hopeful future that I can create, and it's kind of God's expectation for me rather
Mm.
than God's gift to me. And so then I would just work so hard to try to be the person that I thought the Bible wanted me to be. And
Mm.
in doing that, like I literally destroyed relationship after relationship, like hurting
Mm.
friends, family, all other kind of people in my attempt to gain what I thought the Bible was trying to tell me to go out and grasp for myself, but in reality, the Bible was actually telling me what was already mine through Jesus Christ.
Right.
And it's crazy to think back to that. Man, you know what's crazy? And maybe this is a little bit off topic. I think we're still here though. Thinking about like the righteousness and the peace and the joy and the life that I have right now in Jesus Christ, that young 18-year-old who thought he was trying so hard to get it and couldn't grasp it, it was just as much his as it was mine. And I think what's
Right.
crazy in this story is the blessing that Jacob wanted from his father was just as much his from the very beginning of the story because God had said it was, as it was in the moment that he stole and broke all of the relationships around him to try to gain. And it's like, man, when are we going to, and I'm sorry, this is not condemning, this is not condemnation, but like, when are we going to stop trying to get what we already have and just believe that Jesus actually meant it when he says it's a gift? Like, when are we going to really just be like, this gift, I'm going to receive it and I'm going to believe it? Like, when are we going to stop trying so hard to force him to give us what he's already given us?
I think that one of the pleasant kind of byproducts of believing that we already have what he has promised that we do have is that now when we receive the gift, it actually becomes the gift that keeps on giving, right?
Yeah.
Like when you receive this gift by faith, it transforms from the inside out in such a way that you now become a conduit of that gift towards other people.
Yeah.
Whereas what we're seeing in this story and what we're seeing through maybe our own reflective, musings on our previous way of approaching life was that we did what Jacob did, is that we stepped over people to get ours, right? Like we used people transactionally so that we could obtain the blessing that we wanted for ourselves. And so rather than being the gift that keeps on giving, we end up actually being kind of a detriment in the sense that we're harming those around us in an attempt to strive for what has already been given to us.
Yeah, man. And you think about that line in the covenant with Abraham, where he says like, in you all nations will be blessed. And yes, like we believe that that is a foreshadowing of what Christ would do. But I also think that there's a local fulfillment in that, like when we receive the blessings of God, we do bless others. And it's crazy what you're saying. And I think that, man, what a great thing. Like, think about this too. If Jacob would have just received the blessing, he would have been just as much of a blessing to Esau as if he would have
Esau
received
himself
the
would have had the blessing, right?
Yeah.
Esau would have been able to receive that blessing with no detriment to Jacob. They would have been able to both be blessed in this way.
Exactly. Yeah, but like when we try to take it for ourselves, it then feels like something that is only ours and we got it and we deserved it and then we hoard it and it becomes this like it becomes a curse to us and others. When, like you're saying, when we receive it as a gift, we also give it as a gift.
Oh,
man.
Oh, that's good. Because if we feel like we worked to obtain the gift, then I think it's going to come out in the way that we interact with others, that we may have an expectation that they too must put in the work to receive the gift. And so if I have worked hard to obtain forgiveness from God, and then someone wrongs me, but they don't demonstrate a repentant spirit, then I'm unwilling to forgive them because they haven't actually repented, and that's the only way I could forgive them. Whereas when Jesus talks about it, he says, no. Forgive as you have been forgiven, right? Like even if they are the ones who have done you harm, forgive and pray for your enemies. Bless those who curse you. Our posturing towards those around us should never be conditional upon how they treat us. At least this is what is lived out with Jesus on the cross, right? Forgive them, for they don't even know what they're doing. We're able to have that posture towards others when we keep this in mind. And this, I'm reflecting on just how this is playing out in my own life, man. I'll be honest, there's been some friction with my family right now with just, behind the scenes what's going on. I'm not ready to say it yet on this podcast because I want to make sure that it's actually happening. Maybe in a couple episodes, they'll see the big shift that's been taking place. But something major is happening in the background, and it's an exciting time, and it's really, really cool, and we're grateful for the opportunity. And with all of this moving pieces, it's just more friction, and there are more opportunities for us to, I'll say for me, there are more opportunities for me to revert back to this kind of scarcity mindset. And it's I'm reflecting now, it's very important for me to remind myself, to renew my mind of the truth of what I have. And so when I face these obstacles, I don't have to operate from that place of scarcity anymore. I don't have to hold my cards close to my chest, because I can have faith that God is working out that which he's promised already for me.
Yeah, that's so good. That's so good. And I think you've seen this probably the most because you've hosted all of the episodes coming through. it seems like this is the same story happening over and over.
Yeah.
Like, believe and receive, or try hard, and you're probably still going to receive because God is good, but you're going to go through some trials to get there.
Yeah.
And it's like, man, it's just over and over and over. Like, receive the gift. Stop trying so hard to force it. Don't live like you have nothing when you're actually living in the abundance of the kingdom of heaven.
I think that this is perhaps one of the most overlooked beauties of Sabbath rest, right? You and I come from a community, we at least as a community profess with our mouth to really value something like Sabbath, the gift of just slowing down, taking a deep breath, and just trusting that God's in control. And yet then we turn that thing, that gift of rest, into another work that we must accomplish before we receive peace. And you know, when I remind myself that this is the reality that we live in, and the good news is I don't even have to wait till Saturday for that gift of rest to be experienced, but I can in this moment right now take that deep breath and just pause and know that God's got it all under control. All those things that are in my mind that I'm stressing out about right now that are causing these rifts in relationships and all these things, if I remember that God's in control, He's handling it, then I can just breathe. And I can be patient both with myself, I can be patient with others, and I can trust that what God has promised, He will accomplish. So Ben, there's a book that we shouted out, I don't know how many episodes ago, but you were only like 2 or 3 chapters in. We had an enthusiastic vote of support for those couple of chapters. And now you're on your second read through the book and you've listened to like all the podcasts. And so I just kind of wanted to check back on you and make sure we do a little bit of due diligence, because who knows, maybe the rest of the book was terrible. And we really kind of just messed ourselves over by endorsing this book. So what was the book's name? Who is it by? And kind of what's the update?
Yeah, so the book is named No Longer I by Jacob Hotchkiss. And I've gone through it. I've read another like halfway through, and I've listened to all of his podcasts that's like kind of a similar theme. And I just want to recommend this to anybody who wants to just get a deeper understanding of the gospel, because this guy has been led by the Holy Spirit to write this book. And it's kind of like a little bit kind of his journey, kind of just like what he's come out on the other side with. And the first half of the book is just really good theology. If you're into that, it's super great. And then the second half of the book is basically him applying and showing this is what it actually looks like to live this way. When you come against this besetting sin, when you come against this lie, when you come against this situation, this is how we now actually interact in thankfulness and in prayer, so that we walk in faith according to the Spirit rather than the flesh. And it is just a fantastic book. The podcast, also great. Jacob Hotchkiss, never met him, never spoken to him, but I can tell, man, this guy's led by the Holy Spirit, and I can't wait to meet him, whether it's here or, later up or down here in the new earth, wherever it may be. But this guy's got some great thoughts, and I really recommend checking out his book and his podcast.
Awesome. I love that. I'm excited to be able to take a look at it, because now you've been through the entire book. You're going on your round number 2. Maybe it's time for me to give it a crack and to take up the recommendation. And maybe on a future episode, we'll let you know what if it still stands the test. I don't know. Are there any disclaimers that we should be aware of, or are you just like, nah, like it's, obviously maybe nothing is perfect. We always want to put, the Bible first and foremost, but sometimes these books, these podcasts, these shows, or these whatever are really valuable in helping us to kind of gird ourselves with this truth and live it out. And so I'm excited to be able to look at it.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that we want to know about it? Any disclaimers, or no, you just feel like
I think
it was valuable.
Full send, man. Also, it has an Audible, so if you want to check out the Audible, it's there too.
I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do the Audible one because I have a trip coming up where I'm speaking in Florida. By the time that this episode comes out, I will have already finished that speaking engagement. But maybe I'll put that as kind of my soundtrack for this trip, and I'll check back in on a future episode, let you guys know if Pastor Ben is just full of it, and if we can no longer trust him, or maybe it is actually something good. So maybe in the next time we get to talk about this book, we can both share maybe 1 or 2 nuggets that we both felt like was valuable from our digesting of the book.